What up, guys? I'm live for the first time in a while. I don't think I've been live since maybe July or August, but I decided to go live today. I just want to, talk about a few things, a few topics to uncover. Might as well go live talking about them all. I want to give my opinions on Natalia Silva and her chances against Alexa Grasso. And also I want to talk about a bit of, UFC 306. Also, Henry Cejudo wants that money fight with Sean O'Malley. Izzy's out of pound for pound, replaced by Aljo. And apparently, according to Dana White, he claims Conor's not fighting this year, which I think is cap. And I'm going to explain why I think that in today's live. What's up, Toron Brown? How are you? All right. So I just want to get this off my chest. I know like Natalia Silva, gets a lot of hype. A lot of people are high on her. And I mean, Natalia Silva is a good fighter. I think her striking style is amazing. She's entertaining to watch. Uh, Pretty, the perfect package, you name it. But I don't think she beats Alexa Grasso, and I'm going to explain why. Now, you guys might look at this and think, but you're a Grasso simp. Of course, you're going to be biased, and you're going to pick Alexa, and you always pick Alexa, which is true, and I'm always right when I pick her. But I'm going to give my unbiased breakdown of why I think Grasso is a terrible fight for Natalia Silva. First of all, Alexa Grasso ain't no Jessica Andrade. She's much better than Jessica Andrade. I think Alexa Grasso holds a massive advantage when it comes to boxing. For as great as Natalia's striking overall is, and she might overall be a better striker than Alexa, I think punch for punch, I think Grasso has the better hands than Natalia Silva. She's better at cutting off the cage than Jessica Andrade, and the difference between Jessica and Alexa Grasso is Jessica is an overhand hook merchant. She just swings big meaty hooks. Shout out to Lucas Tracy, rest in peace, brother. And overhand rights. That's all she throws, literally. And then the occasional like jumping crane kick that doesn't even land. But overall, Jessica Andrade's striking sucks, and she's wild, and she throws shots that are easy to see coming, easy to evade, and easy to counter. Whereas Alexa Grasso, she throws jabs, straights, she throws way more effective combinations than just hooks and overhands. You know what I mean? And I want to just look at the stats of the two. I want to see Natalia's reach. Let's see. Um, Natalia Silva reach. Let me look that up. I know Grasso's got long arms, whereas let's see. So I think Grasso has like a 1 inch reach advantage as well. I also think Alexa Grasso's taller. Natalia Silva's like 5'4". Grasso's 5'5". She's got the height advantage. Jessica Andrade is like a short mini fridge of a woman. So it's kind of easy to evade her, to just circle, dance around her, and pick her apart. But I don't see her doing that to Alexa Grasso. And one thing I noticed about Natalia Silva in that fight with Jessica is she is hittable and she gets pressured very, very easily. She gets backed up to the cage very easily. And I think Alexa Grasso could confidently walk down Natalia Silva, back her up against the cage, force her into boxing range, and tee off on her. Honestly, I think this fight would be the female version of Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland, where you got the dynamic, really technical, high-level striker against the solid pressure boxer in Sean Strickland. And I think in this matchup, Grasso would be Strickland and Natalia Silva would be Izzy. And if Alexa Grasso could strike with Valentina Shevchenko, I can't see why she couldn't strike with Natalia Silva. And unlike Valentina, there's not going to be a takedown threat in this fight, like there was with Shevchenko. Shevchenko has the ability to mix it up, go to her plan B. If the striking's not working, she can take Alexa Grasso down. Whereas Natalia Silva does not have the offensive grappling in her back pocket to threaten Alexa, like Val does. So I think Grasso can more comfortably and freely walk down Natalia Silva without worrying about being level changed off. And Natalia Silva, she throws a lot of spinning kicks too, I believe. And, history shows if you spin against Grasso, she's going to jump on your back and she's going to choke you out. And I think Grasso, speaking of the grappling, Alexa has the option of being able to take down Natalia Silva. I think she's a better grappler than Natalia Silva. And she has more experience at a higher level. I just think she's more seasoned. And I think she's more battle tested too. I think Natalia is yet to prove herself. And I don't think beating Jessica Andrade is enough to state that she's ready for the champion, Alexa Grasso, or that she's just straight up is going to beat Alexa Grasso. I don't think she's the worst possible matchup for Alexa Grasso in the division. I personally just can't see it. Just laughing how people are underestimating Ortega. I think he's going to pull off the upset this Saturday. I mean, he could. Brian Ortega does have a very solid chance against Diego. His striking is underrated. He does have power. He does have the experience. He is durable. On the ground, Diego's good and maybe good enough to survive, but I think Ortega is slightly better on the ground, maybe even way better. And if Diego gets too confident on the ground with Brian and engages with him there, Brian could definitely sub him. I could totally see it. But then even on the feet, Brian Ortega might be able to catch him too. I am picking Diego Lopez, but I'm not like counting out Brian Ortega. Brian could definitely win. But I'm looking forward to this card. I know the card isn't really that good. There's a lot of no names. I mean, that's why when I did my prediction video for the card, I only covered like 4 fights. 4 fights I'm invested in, which is Irene Aldana versus Norma Dumont. And then, of course, I'm excited for Ortega Lopez. That's a banger. And then Grasso Shevchenko 3 and O'Malley Merab. Those are like the only fights I cared enough to talk about. Daniel Zellhuber, I know he's a pretty good fighter, and he's probably going to win. And I know Ode Osborne's going to probably lose as well because he sucks. But I just didn't care enough to talk about those fights. I only talk about full main cards if they're really stacked or if I really know all the fighters well enough to go over their fights. And maybe for that, I'm a casual. I'm not like the MMA guru or Lucas when he was active or Bedtime MMA or Joey MMA. These guys who cover entire cards from like the early prelims all the way to the main event. I just can't do that. The only time I've ever talked about an entire card from top to bottom was UFC 300 because that fight was stacked and every single fight on that card was exciting. I'm going to be real with you, bro. Lopez is good on the feet, but I see some holes in his stand up. He marches forward like a madman, leaving himself open to be hit. That is true, and Brian Ortega can counter. And I talked about this in my prediction video. He's very good with elbows, like countering you with elbows. Like look what he did. Look at what he did with Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar likes to blitz into range. Brian Ortega was just lining him up, framing him for that lead elbow. It landed, and he was able to hurt Frankie, which led to the finish. He dropped Zombie being sloppy, stepping into range with a counter spinning back elbow. So it's possible that he does catch Diego. I could see it. And if this is like a 5-round fight, honestly, I'd probably go with Brian Ortega to win. Also, I see Ortega cracking Lopez in the exchanges on the feet. I got called crazy for saying that. I mean, it's not a crazy take. It could happen. It totally could happen. But all I know is you guys need to, cool your jets on Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva, I need to see her do more than just beat Jessica Andrade. I need to see her against more top competition. I'm not saying she isn't good, but I think people are just too quick to say that she's a future champion. And people need to pump the brakes on saying she beats Alexa Grasso. I don't even think she would beat Valentina Shevchenko, if I'm being honest. I really don't. Because I even think Valentina Shevchenko can beat her on the feet. But Valentina, if she needs to, if she wants to, she can take the fight. She can take the fight to the ground and just win with her grappling. But yeah, I don't see Grasso losing that. I think Grasso would land her jabs. She'd land the jab 1-2 down the middle. And I think she would piece her up. I think she'd piece up Natalia Silva. Natalia only wins at kicking range, but I don't think she could keep Alexa at kicking range for long. Like Alexa has good pressure. She's very good at cutting off the octagon and getting in range and forcing you in the pocket. And that's why Valentina Shevchenko had to grapple as much as she did, because she could only keep Grasso at distance for so long. And Grasso is just very good on the feet. She's not a Jessica Andrade, so I don't think it's going to be that simple and straightforward for Natalia to just dance around Alexa Grasso and pick her apart for 5 rounds. It's just not happening, and she's not finishing her either. What about Karine Silva? I don't know. I haven't seen enough of her fights. I heard she's like got good grappling. But I need to see her get a good win. What about Rose Aaron Macy if she ever comes back? Yeah. What do you mean if she ever comes back? Of course, Barbara's coming back. I think Natalia Silva with Rose, it just depends. If Rose could break her 3-fight curse, I think she could be a good matchup against Natalia Silva. I think she could beat Silva. But the problem is, every time Rose wins 3 in a row, she loses the next one. So I don't know. Um, that's a toss up for me. But Rose is kind of similar to Alexa Grasso, lanky boxer, but well rounded, very fluid on the feet, but can mix it up, can grapple, has good submissions. Uh I'm not sure. The reason why I'm not set on a prediction because Rose always chokes after winning 3 in a row, and I think she's about to go undefeated 3-0 this year in 2024. I do see her beating Erin Blanchfield. Um, but I think Natalia beats Macy Barber, and I think she would beat Erin Blanchfield. I think she can defend Erin's takedowns, and I think she can beat her standing because Erin is very hittable. She was getting pieced up by Madden. She was getting pieced up um by Santos before Santos gassed out. Rose of the 3 you mentioned has the best chance at beating Natalia, though. I need to see more of Karine too. Barber is always injured. Not always. I wouldn't say she's always injured. And I don't think she got injured ahead of UFC Denver. I just think something happened. Some other health complications came in the way and she couldn't show up for that reason. Forgot about Manon and Kang or Kong. I think Manon would beat Natalia Silva as well. Wang Kong, I don't know. I mean, I know Wang Kong is a good kickboxer. Natalia doesn't really grapple offensively, so it would be a striking match. But I mean, for MMA, with the MMA experience that Natalia has, I'd probably go with Silva. And she'd probably grapple if the fight got too tough on the feet. And I don't know how good Wang Kong's takedown defense is. But in pure kickboxing, Kong probably beats her. I mean, she beat Shevchenko. Macy has other health complications. Yeah, but I do think that she's going to be back eventually, though. I think she'll fight again by the end of the year, probably November, December. I don't think she's going to be out for that long, honestly. I don't see it. Okay. Okay, well, I hope she does because I would love to see Wang Kong make it to the top of the division, work her way to a title shot. I mean, the women's flyweight division is so good now. It's evolved. Like, isn't that crazy how much better this weight class has gotten? Like, we went from having cans at the top of the division at one point in time. Like, Jessica I was the number one flyweight. So was Caitlin. Cynthia was in the top 5. Lauren Murphy was in the top 5. Jessica was the next best thing you had. Now Jessica's being ran out the top 5 by these young up and comers like Erin and Natalia. Valentina got dethroned. Alexis champ now. Manon is the next contender for the belt. Rose is in the mix. Barber's coming into her own. Like, this division is so good now. Like, there's actually fights to be excited for. Whereas back then it was like, okay, it's Valentina and then the next victim. Who cares? Now women's flyweight is what women's strawweight used to be, in my opinion. And then Whaley moves to flyweight, and Kong versus Whaley in China. That would be interesting. That'd be interesting, but Whaley would likely win that experience. She's more well rounded, and she could take her down if she needs to. But again, Natalia Silva, Manon, Aaron, Rose, Barber, Grasso, 6 good fighters at the top of the division, man. I hope this division, being in the state it is, can stay intact. I hope it doesn't fall off like strawweight, because strawweight is such a bad division now. It's like crazy how much strawweight has fallen off since COVID. Valentina got her wish. How did she get her wish? Because as far as I'm concerned, she didn't want this fight on Mexican Independence Day, and it's happening on Mexican Independence Day. So, yeah, if anything, her worst nightmare came true. Or you mean she got her wish in terms of the competition stepping up, or what? Man, Saturday can't come soon enough, man. I'm just ready to get this trilogy over with. And hope to God, man, Alexa Grasso doesn't lose this trilogy, because it's possible that she loses, and that would suck for her legacy, man, to, have her whole championship reign be fights with Valentina and then she loses the last one. That would just be so annoying, but I think she'll get it done. Oh, before the first fight with Grasso, she made a plan for other straw weights. Okay, interesting. Um, it would suck if Val gets robbed. I mean, I just hope we have a decisive outcome this time, and I think we will. I think this time around, someone is going to dominate. I don't see this trilogy being as close as the second fight. Either Valentina's going to go out there and she's going to come in hot, and she's going to probably beat Grasso's ass and make her pay for the alleged robbery, or Grasso's going to go out there and prove that she is the better fighter for once and for all. I feel like there's no in between. I feel like there's no in between, and I see a finish happening in this fight, and I'm hoping Grasso gets the finish, and I think she will. I'm going to predict that Grasso is going to stop Shevchenko, and I think she'll finish her on the ground. Ground and pound is my prediction. I think she'll do some good work on the feet with her boxing. And I think this time around, her takedown defense will be a little bit more on point than the first couple of fights. And if that's the case, I think Val's really going to have a hard time beating Alexa. I really do. Because I just cannot see her beating Grasso in a pure striking match without any takedowns, without any grappling. I think Grasso wins that fight. And I think if Val cannot get her down, I think she's going to be in a lot of trouble. She dropped Valentina before. I think she can drop her again. Do you remember when Val was asking for strawweights to step up? I don't, but I mean, it's happened twice before. You had Joanna move up to fighter, you had Jessica move up, and now Rose moved up. Grasso moved up a while ago. So, yeah, I guess I see what you're saying in terms of her getting her wish. I think it was James Litch interview. When was that? Was that like a couple of years ago when oh yeah, you said it was like before the um first Grasso fight. I guess I could see why she would ask that because women's flyweight at that time was in the drought. It wasn't good. No good top contenders. And I think Val was just getting bored of crushing cans. So yeah, it makes a bit of sense. Um, but let's see. So Henry Cejudo, basically, he says that he wants Sean next, assuming Sean O'Malley is to lose to Marab. But he talks about it like it's a foregone conclusion. Like he acts like he knows for sure Marab is going to win, and then that's going to line him up perfectly to fight Sean. Which I mean, I wouldn't be too sure. Like it's possible. Yes, Marab can win, but O'Malley's a really dangerous fighter. His striking is really dangerous. His takedown defense is coming a long way. And I don't know, man. He might still be the bantamweight champion after Saturday. And then what? You're not getting that fight with you're not gonna get that fight with O'Malley unless you can work your way up the rankings and at least get a couple of wins. But I mean, his alternative to that is if he doesn't get the fight with O'Malley, he says he wants to go down to 125. Um, but I don't know. I don't know why he would go back down a weight class at this point in his career. He's had a history of struggling to make 125. He's older now. The older you get, the harder it is on your body to make the weight. Although he is saying that he's like, I don't know, he got this like nutritionist that's helping him stay disciplined. So I guess we'll see how that goes for him. I don't know if he'd get his belt back though in the flyweight division just because he's older and in these lower weight classes, fighters 35 and up don't seem to win title fights. So I don't know. Um, but Henry Cejudo, he really screwed up his legacy by retiring in his prime in hopes that Dana would beg him to come back and would pay him the money he wanted. Didn't work in his favor. Then he started making noise from the sidelines and then just came back. And now he's lost twice. And now he's irrelevant. And he's holding on to hopes of getting that Sean fight so he could be in the spotlight again, so he can be relevant again. But I mean, if he does get that fight, if Sean does lose to Marab and fights Henry, I think stylistically, O'Malley would have a field day with Henry Cejudo because Henry Cejudo, not in his prime anymore. He's short, leaves his chin in the air. I don't think his wrestling would be that effective against someone like Sean with his takedown defense being as improved as it is. He might get down O'Malley. I don't think he's keeping him down. And on the feet, I just cannot see a world where Henry Cejudo doesn't get chinned by Sugar Sean O'Malley. I think Sean would KO him, honestly. And I think he'd end his career. So be careful what you wish for, Henry. But I just think Henry's bitter, man, because Sean O'Malley came on his podcast literally just to diss him. Like 20 seconds in, he came on the Usman Cejudo podcast just to say, Henry, how did you let Aljo take you down so easily? Laughed at him, and then he got out of the live or out of the podcast. And then as Cope, Cejudo's like, oh, he was trolling us. When it's like, nah, bro, he was trolling you. He gave Usman his flowers. It was you that he was dissing. It was you that he was trashing, bro, not Usman. So, and I think he was also bitter that Kamaru was even giving Henry his props on that podcast. And I mean, O'Malley has a good point. Like, how are you going to let Aljo take you down 4 times? And you're like, you pride yourself in being like this Olympic level gold medal wrestler. You know, no one can take you down. Aljo did easily, and yet he couldn't take down O'Malley, who, you know, got taken down 6 times by Peter Yan. So that is kind of embarrassing on Cejudo's end. Henry should try his hands at featherweight. No, he should probably try his hands at maybe one more fight at bantamweight, and if he loses, retire. Yeah, let's talk about that. So Cejudo said that he has like some inside info that O'Malley has a bad back in camp. I don't know how true that is. honestly, Henry could just be capping. But if that is true, like, why would you leak that? Like, it's kind of a dick move. Like, that's just low class to go out and do something like that. But even if he's injured, I mean, O'Malley literally was injured going into the Aljamain Sterling fight, went 6 weeks without grappling because his rib was injured. And yet he still easily defended all of Aljo's takedowns. I mean, I'm not saying that he can beat Marab injured, but let's not act like he's not capable of winning while injured. Like, O'Malley is just that guy. Those tall, skinny guys are scary, and Henry is short. Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't mind seeing O'Malley move up at some point. I wouldn't mind that either. I mean, he's talked about wanting to fight Ilia Topuria or Max Holloway. Both fights would actually be interesting. I mean, if he can go out there and knock out Marab, which I'm predicting he's going to do, I think he should probably defend his belt one more time. Try to get Umar Nurmagomedov out of the way. If he can go out there and beat Umar and has like now 3 defenses under his belt, then he's undeniable. Like, you can't deny him if he wants to move up and challenge for a second belt. And I mean, who wouldn't want to see him fight Max Holloway? Two good strikers, or himself and Ilya. I mean, both guys have been, barking at each other across the cage for a long time. It's a fight that both guys want. And I mean, if Ilya can go out there and beat Holloway, and Marab loses this weekend to O'Malley, I mean, again, I think that O'Malley should at least get one more defense. But if both guys can go out there, defend their titles at least one or two more times, I think that's the fight to make. Sterling was also beating Henry standing. I know. And I mean, if Aljo can piece you up like that, imagine O'Malley. Like, you're not taking down Sean, or if you do, you're not keeping him down. And if you have to strike with O'Malley, being a 5'4" guy who has that karate stance, leaves his chin in the air, bro, you're getting caught. You're getting sniped. You're getting sniped by Sean. Maybe if Henry was like in his prime, he'd have a really good chance to win. But Henry right now kind of sucks. So I don't want to say he sucks because he did take Aljo to a split decision. He did have a good start against Marab, so he doesn't suck, but he's just not good enough at this point. And again, not in his prime. Hate to say it, but I think O'Malley can outbox Holloway. That's an interesting take. I don't know about that because, I mean, we know how good Max's boxing is. I mean, he carries that title as the best boxer in the UFC. I mean, I don't think he's the best boxer in the UFC, but I don't know. There's only one way to find out, is if those two lock horns in the octagon. As of right now, though, I don't think so. I think that Max would be the better boxer if they did fight. Yeah, he was. He actually was. Aljo does have pretty underrated stand up. He's got good footwork. He's very awkward, hard to hit clean. And he's got good volume, good kicks. Aljo's a complete fighter. And speaking of Aljo, I want to get into this. So Aljamain Sterling replaces Israel Adesanya in the pound for pound rankings. It's kind of weird. It just feels like by default he's replacing him, but I've had some people explain to me that's because Adesanya didn't bounce back from his title loss and Aljo did. So I guess that's kind of fair. But then that kind of begs the question, then what? What happens if Aljamain Sterling loses to Movsar Evloev? Are we just gonna put Movsar in the pound for pound rankings? And I know a lot of people don't like Evloev, so I know people wouldn't be happy to see him in the pound for pound list, but you might have to make Evloev pound for pound if he beats Aljo. But if Aljo beats Evloev, then he definitely deserves to keep his spot. But as an Izzy fan, it does break my heart. It does make me sad because I love Adesanya, and it sucks to see him have this fall from grace. He once was like the best in the world. He had the highest of highs in his MMA career. Had a legendary run as a middleweight champion. second greatest middleweight of all time, 12 consecutive title fights, I believe, in the UFC, which is insane for like the last 4 years. I think he's like, let's see. I think he's like 9-4. I was counting down his losses. I think he's like 9-4 in title fights in the UFC as well, which is that's also pretty crazy. So Adesanya is a legend, but yeah, it's sad. It's sad, you know. I never would have imagined that Adesanya was going to have this downfall, especially after he knocked out Poatan and became like the two-time champion. I thought Pereira was like the worst matchup for him, and I was thinking, man, if Pereira can't beat him twice in a row at middleweight, I don't see who else in the middleweight division could beat Israel Adesanya. I never would have imagined that right after he's going to lose his belt in dominant fashion to Sean. And I never envisioned Dricus du Plessis beating Israel Adesanya either. But hindsight's a crazy thing, right? I mean, this sport is just so unpredictable. You can never predict what happens. Like not too long ago, Adesanya was this close to being pound for pound number one. He was like pound for pound number two by Volkanovski for a little bit until, you know, he lost the belt to Poatan. Then he got the belt back. He was like top 5 pound for pound, but then loses to Sean, then loses to Dricus. So it sucks, man. And then even Usman too. It's like the end of an era. But, you know, no one can be on top forever, right? So, and I mean, Aljamain Sterling was at some point in time kind of a dominant bantamweight champion. I mean, not dominant performances because he took Jan and Cejudo to split decisions. And then he beat an old, injured, one-armed TJ Dillashaw. So, I mean, it's not that impressive. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say Aljamain had an impressive run as champion, but he had 3 title defenses, 3 consecutive title defenses. Dominic Cruz and Dillashaw had 3 title defenses, but not consecutively. They had 2 defenses on their first reign, lost the belt, and then got 1 defense upon regaining the title. So they got like 1 defense upon getting the belt back. So you add that up, that's 3 defenses. But Aljo, on a technicality, may have the most bantamweight defenses in bantamweight history. So for all we know, Aljamain might just be the bantamweight GOAT, as much as I hate to say it. I mean, Cruz is the GOAT, but Aljo has a case for being the bantamweight GOAT. So I guess him being pound for pound, given his accolades and his status and what he's done in the sport, I guess he does deserve it. Also being the fact that he's coming off a win, but I just wish things didn't have to be this way. I really wish that Izzy could still be pound for pound. I really wish he could have got the belt back against Dricus too. It's really disappointing. But you know what? You know what I was thinking? Also, if Aljo does lose to Evloev, I could see a scenario where maybe the winner of Khamzat Whitaker might have a home in the pound for pound list. I would not mind seeing Whitaker in the top 15 pound for pound again. Or if Khamzat wins, why not put him there? Let's see. Sterling. Oh, okay. I already read that. Tony Ferguson and Nick Diaz are rumored for UFC 311 in January. Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And Dana White was saying that Conor McGregor is not fighting this year. That's right. I'm going to get into that topic as well. He said Conor will not fight in 2024. Yeah, he's saying that Conor isn't fighting in 2024. Hold on. Sorry for the brief pause, guys. I just need to open another tab to just see the full title of this live so I can make sure I'm covering all the topics I have in the title. But yeah, so Dana's saying that Conor's not fighting this year. But I don't know if I believe him. But if he's correct, I mean, he is saying that early 2025 at the latest is when he's coming back. Wouldn't that be crazy to see McGregor Chandler on the same card as Nick Diaz, Tony Ferguson? That would be pretty cool. But here's why I do not believe Dana White. Here's why I think Conor is going to come back this year at UFC 310. So I don't think there's going to be any title fights booked in December. I just can't see it because Bilal Muhammad established that he's not coming back by the end of the year. Shavkat Rakhmonov came out and said that Bilal won't be ready for December. Islam Makhachev isn't ready for December. That's been confirmed because of his injury. I mean, they could do an interim title fight headlining that card, Arman Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker or somebody, or Dustin Poirier. But I mean, if that doesn't happen, are they going to make Weili Suarez headline that card? No. Are they going to make Pantoja versus Kai Azakura or whoever headline that card? Pantoja's not big enough of a name to headline a pay-per-view on his own if it's not in Brazil. So forget that. That ain't happening. Sean O'Malley could turn around by the end of the year, but I don't see that happening either. So personally, what I think is the final two title fight, well, not final two, that's actually cap. I think personally, I think there's going to be no title fights booked for UFC 311 or 310. I think Conor Chandler is going to get rescheduled for that card. And I think UFC 309, we're going to see 3 title fights. Bones Miocic, I think they're going to get Pantoja as like the co-main event and Weili Suarez as the feature fight. And we're going to see 3 title fights. And I think those are going to be the final 3 title fights we see in 2024 after October. I don't see Dricus du Plessis coming back in December. I mean, he could, but he had a hard-fought, grueling fight with Israel Adesanya. I could see DDP wanting a bit of time off and waiting till like early 2025 to fight again. So yeah, I don't see the middleweight champion coming back in the end of the year. So I think it's going to be Conor in December. I mean, these are pretty good reasons, are they not? He's fighting in 2024. That's why he's not fighting. I mean, he'll probably fight in 2025 if he fights this year. That would be a good way of that would be way too good of a card if they put Ferguson versus Diaz on a Conor card at most. Conor cards are usually boring. That's true, but not UFC 264. UFC 264 is a pretty good card. You had Burns, Wonder Boy is like the co-main. You had Tai Tuivasa on there against Greg Hardy. And then you had Sean O'Malley on the card, Irene Aldana. That was a pretty good card. So I could see them making another good Conor card. But I see what you're saying. Like, UFC 257 wasn't good. It was underwhelming. And what other Conor cards did they kind of underwhelm? Oh, yeah, also the Conor Cerrone card wasn't that good. But, I mean, UFC 229 was a good card. You had Tony Ferguson on a card with Conor. They could do that again. You had Dominic Reyes on there. You had the Black Beast, Alexander Volkov. So not all Conor cards are bad. But that would be nice to have Ferguson Diaz on the McGregor card, considering the dislike Ferguson has for McGregor. And I can see them talking trash at the press conference. Oh, totally. Totally. That would definitely happen. And maybe that can set up like a 4-man tournament, you know? Maybe the winner of Conor Chandler could fight the winner of Diaz for, well, no, I don't want to see Tony rematch Michael Chandler, so forget that. But Tony always loses, so let's say Nick Diaz beats Tony, which is kind of a foregone conclusion. Anybody beats Tony. Nick could fight the winner of Conor Chandler. Imagine Nick Diaz versus Michael Chandler at 170, or I don't think we're ever going to get Conor Diaz 3. But I could potentially see Conor, Nick Diaz, and Nick could go out there, try to avenge his younger brother, get one back for the Diaz bros, for the team, for Diaz Army. That would be a pretty good storyline. But there's one thing I actually want to mention in this live that's not in the title. Did you guys hear Jorge Masvidal talking about coming back? Jorge Masvidal has came out and said that he wants to come back in December. And he said he wants to fight either Leon Edwards or Michael Chandler. But you know what? If Chandler doesn't get the Conor fight, the fight to make is Conor McGregor versus Jorge. Gamebred Masvidal. That's a fight I feel like always should have been booked. It never came to fruition. I think now would be a good time because both guys are on like the down slopes in their careers. Masvidal's on like a 3-fight losing streak in MMA, 4-fight losing streak if you want to count boxing. Conor McGregor, 2-fight L streak. So I think it's a good matchup for each other at this point in both guys' careers. Loser goes home, I'll say. Leon Edwards Masvidal, I wouldn't mind that fight. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight just because they have history. They were supposed to fight at UFC 269. Jorge gave him a 3-piece in a soda backstage at the UFC London event 5 years ago. So I kind of feel like they have unfinished business, but it kind of doesn't make sense. But I mean, it's a good fight for Leon to build himself back up in the win column. And I do think Leon would quite easily pick apart Jorge Masvidal. Masvidal Chandler would be interesting. Maybe Masvidal might actually be able to beat Michael Chandler. But then I can also see Chandler winning that fight. But to have Masvidal back is kind of exciting. I don't know about you. I want to see Justin versus Hooker next. Me too. That would be a good fight. Or Hooker versus Oliveira. That's another banger that I've actually been calling for since 2020. That's a fight that I've had on my fight to make list for years. But then, you know, their career trajectories kind of separated when Oliveira became the champion and Dan kind of went on a bit of a downslide. But now Dan is on a resurrection tour and Oliveira is like 1-3 in his last 4, so it's possible. Or I think he's 1-2 in his last 3. Correction. Hooker Poirier 2 is another good fight. And Dustin Poirier said he wants to come back for one more fight. And he's not just going to take a fight with anybody. He's only going to take a fight with whichever big name they can give him, whether it's Gaethje, whether it's Conor, maybe not Masvidal, that's his bro. So I mean, Dan Hooker could be a good comeback fight for Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier never loses 2 in a row. He beat Dan before. I think he could definitely beat him again. Most likely would beat Dan Hooker again because Dustin Poirier is just a bad matchup for Dan because he's super durable. I think he has a power advantage. I think he's better than him on the ground. And he's got better hands. He's better in boxing range. And I don't see Dan Hooker knocking out Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has a good chin. I mean, I know Gaethje knocked him out, but that was with a pitch perfect head kick. That would literally knock out anybody. But yeah. But you know what? Make that fight. The first fight was a good scrap. Dan Hooker's last 2 fights were really exciting, so I would not mind seeing that one be ran back after 4 years. Definitely. He'd definitely be a good dance partner. Again, Dustin doesn't lose 2 in a row. He beat Dan Hooker before, and I think he's just a better fighter. Again, I think he's got better boxing. He's got the durability to handle Dan Hooker's power. I think he's got better cardio than Dan Hooker. I don't really see what Dan Hooker would do differently if they fought again. He did. He did. I mean, he was beating him up early, but he wasted like a lot of energy. So, I mean, maybe what Dan could do differently in a second fight is, I mean, they would be in a bigger cage this time. I think them fighting in the smaller cage sort of favored Dustin Poirier and was unbeneficial to the longer rangier Dan Hooker. But now in the bigger octagon, if Dan could be smart, fight a bit conservative, and try to keep that range on Dustin, then maybe he won't gas out this time. And maybe he'll have enough energy to go with Dustin if it goes into the late rounds. And you know what? Maybe he could hurt Dustin again like he did in the last fight. It's possible. And maybe he can better capitalize on hurting Poirier. But he just, again, he has to fight. He has to be more efficient with his energy, I think. Because a fresh Dan Hooker definitely is problematic for Dustin Poirier. But Dustin is just a dog, man. And Dan Hooker, he was getting hit a lot by Gamrot. Gamrot was hurting him. I just cannot see why Dustin wouldn't beat him again. Yeah, use more leg kicks. Just use more kicks at range in general. Like deep kicks to the body to keep him at bay. A lot of low kicks. If he can do that, I like his odds against Poirier. I really do. That's a really tricky fight. I could really see Dan Hooker winning that fight. I really can. I could see him chinning Gaethje too, but every time I count Gaethje out coming off a loss, or I think said fighter has a good chance to beat him coming off a loss, Gaethje always goes from underperforming to then overperforming in his next fight. So it's hard to tell because I mean, I knew he'd beat Chandler coming off the Khabib loss, but I thought Chandler had a good chance. I mean, he went out there, beat Chandler up. And then I picked Fiziev to beat Justin Gaethje after Charles Oliveira beat him. I thought Gaethje was done, and then Gaethje comes back. He beats Fiziev and he knocks out Dustin Poirier. So I'm probably gonna have to go with Gaethje to beat Dan Hooker, and he probably knocks Dan Hooker out. I mean, the fight would be a war most likely, but I think Gaethje would probably batter him. He'd batter his legs, batter him in the pocket, most likely in close range. We've seen Dan Hooker get chinned before. Michael Chandler was able to knock him out. Gaethje would probably KO him as well, if I'm being honest. But I would not count out Hooker. I think Conor. Tony's just a complete shell of himself. Like he's so bad everywhere now. It's insane. His striking is horrible. His grappling isn't good anymore. Conor McGregor has some tread left in the tires, at least. So I think Conor would win that. I think prime for prime, Conor was a bad matchup for Tony. And past their primes, I think Conor's still good enough to beat Tony Ferguson. All right. But, speaking of Poirier, as a fan, I'm rooting for him to go out on top. And I think it's possible. I think Dustin might retire on a win. I think. But man, I don't really know what else to talk about. I've been on here for a bit. Unless you have any more questions, I think I'm gonna bounce from this live. But I'll be live again soon when there's a bit more to talk about. Originally, I was intending to do an individual video on each of these topics, but I thought I might as well just go live. So, but thank you for joining. Hold on a sec. I actually think the opposite, bro. I think Prime Tony was a bad match for Conor simply because he has a good chin and good cardio. I mean, yeah, that is true. But Eddie Alvarez had a good chin and good cardio. And against Prime Conor, unless you're Nate Diaz, I don't think having a good chin really means much because Conor was such an accurate sniper and you just couldn't make any mistakes with him on the feet or else he will make you pay. And Tony Ferguson did not have as good of a chin as Nate Diaz, prime for prime. That's just straight up facts. Tony Ferguson was getting dropped in like every fight, pretty much. Lando Veneta dropped him. I think Kevin Lee dropped him too. Anthony Pettis dropped him. Gaethje's like the only guy with power who somehow wasn't able to drop Tony Ferguson, but he beat Tony Ferguson up. And I think if these guys could drop Tony, imagine Conor McGregor. But Conor McGregor is good at finishing fights once he has you hurt. It's very hard to come back and recover and rebound when Conor drops you. I know Eddie recovered, but eventually, like he was not able to get back in the fight. And eventually Conor McGregor was able to get him out of there. But I will say, if Tony could weather the early storm against Conor and he drags it like into the third round, I could potentially see Tony Ferguson turning the tide, starts landing his own shots on a tired Conor, cuts him up with elbows. And then usually when Conor does get tired and pressured, he does kind of hunch over. So I could see maybe a standing guillotine or Darce choke for Ferguson if it does go into deep waters. But those early rounds would be too dangerous for Tony. And Tony just makes way too many mistakes. And I don't know. I just see Tony being like a Yuri Prohaska to Conor McGregor's Alex Pereira, where you got the durable, awkward, unorthodox striker against the perfect, powerful counter striker, who, if you make a mistake against him, you're going to get put out. That's how I see that fight, honestly. I don't think Conor would have knocked out Tony. I mean, again, if Pettis is dropping you, man, why can't Conor? Prime Ferguson would drown Conor. He could. It's possible. It is very possible, but that is, I don't know. It's very unlikely. The UFC kept Ferguson away from Conor for a reason. Yeah, I mean, I do think Tony should have got the Conor fight, and I feel bad for Tony. He never really got the big fights that he was looking for. He never got the Khabib fight because it was cursed. God wouldn't let it happen for some reason. I don't know why. And Conor McGregor didn't want that fight. But I mean, I guess at the time, Conor just didn't see Tony worthy enough to fight him. I guess because he wasn't big enough of a name, and Conor, being the big star he is, was only looking for other big fights. Which, I mean, I don't think that was fair. And I mean, Conor now is willing to fight Tony now that Tony's past his prime. Didn't want him when he was in his prime, which was interesting, but still, prime for prime, it's still not a good matchup for McGregor. Or for Tony, I mean. Oh, Gaethje right now would knock Conor out. 100% he'd sleep Conor. He'd butcher his legs worse than Poirier did, and he'd get him against the cage, and he'd land on that chin, and he'd put Conor to sleep. Yeah, but I mean, he was more willing to fight Khabib, and against Tony, he had a better chance to beat Ferguson. So I think Khabib was a worse matchup for Conor than Tony, but I think he wanted that Khabib fight because that just seemed like a bigger fight for Conor at that point in his career. You know what I mean? Khabib, the 27-0 undefeated guy, he wanted a chance to take that undefeated record from him and, I guess, derail the hype. Whereas I guess Tony didn't really have that notoriety to him at the time. Yeah, he did. It's kind of weird how, like, he chose Donald Cerrone coming off a loss as opposed to Gaethje. Like, I think Conor should have fought Justin Gaethje at UFC 246, and I wish he did. That would have been a way more interesting fight. And it's not like Conor couldn't have beat Gaethje at the time. I mean, Conor at UFC 246 was, I know Cerrone was in his worst form, but that was still one of the last best versions of Conor we've ever seen. So that was the closest to prime Conor we ever were going to get since UFC 205. So I think he could have beat him that night, but Gaethje definitely had a chance. And I think Conor was just looking for a fight that he knew was like a guaranteed win. But I mean, then again, he did take the fight with Poirier, which was a risky comeback fight. But maybe he took the fight because he already beat him before and had that confidence of, I did it before, I'll just do it again. All right, but all right, I'm gonna end this live now. But thank you for joining Toron and everyone who joined this live. And yeah, peace. Looking forward to this weekend.